One of the biggest challenges facing IT departments is how to effectively manage the many complex tasks and processes that run across a technically diverse IT landscape. Even smaller companies typically run at least 20 custom applications, and enterprise-scale firms upwards of 700 on average. These applications drive critical tasks and processes that are essential to ongoing daily operations, and crucial systems like ERP, databases, and servers. At this point, companies really have two options. They can put in the time and resources to learn how to create, run, manage, and support these processes across a disparate environment, or they can adopt a job scheduler tool to centralize and manage their IT tasks and processes. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about the pros and cons of both approaches and how you can use orchestration to regain control of your IT landscape. My name is Tom Allen, site editor at Computing, and to discuss these topics, I'm joined by Greg McLaughlin. Sorry, Greg.
No worries.
Regional Sales Manager, Automation at HelpSystems. So, Greg, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks for the intro. And yes, the name's Greg McLaughlin, and I work for HelpSystems, and I would lead the EMEA Automation business unit. So, HelpSystems, we've been in business since sort of 1982, and I've been helping companies improve their workload automation and enterprise scheduling capabilities since 2016. And I've helped dozens of companies improve their operational efficiency across their IT landscape.
Brilliant. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. First up, I just want to say to our audience, a little bit of housekeeping for you before we begin. Please, this is an interactive WebSem, so please do ask questions in the box below the video right now. We'll also be pushing some polls live today. Please do take part in those. It gives us a lot to talk about. I'm going to be publishing our first one right now. So we are asking, what challenges do you currently experience in running your IT tasks and processes? Job status visibility and reporting, centralized management console, enforcing cross-platform or cross-application dependencies, triggering tasks dynamically in response to specific conditions, repeatability, or something else. So that is going live now. Please do take part, and we'll discuss the results a little later on. So, Greg, we've already said a little bit about the sort of disparate nature of IT today. There are thousands of companies out there that sort of manage their business through all these infinite number of IT systems and processes and applications. What sort of benefit would they see from automation, centralization, and orchestration?
Okay. The benefits are vast, really. Every company out there operating any kind of a electronic system involving computers or servers, databases, will have a huge amount of processes running across all of these systems, So in terms of benefits, one of the biggest benefits is centralization of all of your IT tasks and processes into the one single pane of glass. So you've got one place to go to manage all of your jobs. What we do is provide the sort of scalable software that spans your entire IT landscape and then delivers a lot of enterprise capabilities, things like high availability, cross-platform scheduling, dependencies, triggers, alerts, and a whole raft of just generally improved efficiencies. So typically companies would have a manual element in managing these processes prior to looking at enterprise scheduling. So someone may check a server to see if a file has arrived, for example, and you'd be amazed how big companies operate using this type of approach to their business, But then they'll talk to us about scheduling and enterprise scheduling, and then we'll help them understand the processes where they sit now in their environment, and we'll build a strategy to help them get those processes from where they are now over into a proper enterprise scheduling solution.
So before we go any further, can you just sort of briefly sum up the differences between automation and orchestration for those of our audience who might not be familiar with the terms?
Absolutely. Okay, so automation, We typically like to think of automation as the individual building block. Everybody automates, okay? Every company that runs systems or processes or applications will automate to some degree, okay? So automation is like the one-dimensional job, okay? So it's a job that will sit on a system and it will do an action. So it'll go from point A to point B, okay? So that's automation, and everybody automates. Orchestration is taking that to the next level, okay? Orchestration is effectively the ability to manage the relationship between each of these little pieces of automation, okay? So the ability to design complex end-to-end flows and linear processes, one to many, many to one. And we also support logic-based decision-making, so you can orchestrate an end-to-end workflow based on the outcomes of previous processes, you know, so if this, then that, this type of thing. So orchestration's like multi-dimensional, three-dimensional. Automation's one-dimensional, orchestration is multi-dimensional.
So automation is effectively like operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any sort of bearing on what other tasks are being completed around it, but orchestration does.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what would it look like, the steps involved when a company sort of moves from one to the other? If you say like pretty much everybody today is automating, but they're not all orchestrating, what would be involved in that move?
Okay, so the best outcomes that we have in relation to companies that are interested in making that move are when we work in tandem with the business, okay? So the first step is understanding the automation that they have internally already and documenting that, okay? So the second step would be getting orchestration or scheduling expert involved in trying to translate that automation into a more robust orchestration hub, like what we offer Jams, okay? So Jams would be the orchestration hub that centralizes all of the IT tasks and processes irrespective of where they sit into that one pane of glass.
Okay, and we're going to talk about Jams a little bit later in more detail. I want to come back to one of your earlier points, actually, because you said about bringing everything together under a single pane of glass with centralization. Everyone wants to do the single pane of glass approach. But recently we've seen people sort of adopting many disparate systems as they sort of tried to rush to survive the pandemic, and you know they just took whatever worked. Has that affected the demand for centralization at all? Has it grown in demand over the last 2 years?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's always pressures on IT departments. It's always, you know, harder, faster, stronger, constantly. I mean, IT is probably the most pressurized business unit of any organization. IT management want more out of everything. COVID completely exacerbated that, you know, and we have some really interesting health service related use cases for Jams that were to do, you know, with which I'll maybe go into later. The processing of customer appointments for testing and various things like that, you know. So yes, COVID definitely made the drive to automate and centralize bigger, and we've seen an increase in awareness of enterprise scheduling across a lot of the organizations that we deal with, you know. So it's typically a company would come to us because they've established there's an element of the business or the operation is not running efficiently, you know. It could be something that's been running in a certain way for years, but maybe because of the lack of staff, as an example, during COVID, it's come to the fore, and then they'll approach us with a business case, you know. So that this is what's wrong. How can you help us fix it? Okay.
Obviously, you've talked about customers there, and we're going to get into a case study later on, I know. What would a typical engagement look like with a customer? What can you offer to someone when they come and come to you? I realise that there may not be any such thing as a typical engagement because everyone has very, very different systems. But if there were, what would that look like?
It is very true. It's nothing's typical when you talk to companies, because every company evolves in a different fashion and has different ways of doing things, and every IT professional has different ways of doing things as well, which makes the job really interesting because it's constantly evolving and changing. So we would take a very bespoke approach to any engagement that we have. But one sort of common engagement is a company that's come to us that have loads of processes running across multiple different systems, all organized by different native scheduling solutions or in-house developed scripts or whatever it happens to be. So we call these companies my first scheduler. Yeah. So and they come in all shapes and sizes. You know, I've worked with companies where there's 5 people. I've worked with companies where there's 50,000 people. And one of the main themes that they come to us with is that they're running mission critical jobs that have a direct impact on the business if something goes wrong. So it's basically the fundamentals of their day-to-day operation, you know. Processing, it can be anything from financial, commercial, operational, reputational, and loads more. So companies need to know that this type of process runs reliably, and they also need to know if something goes wrong, you know. So that's one theme, sort of criticality in jobs. Another is being able to manage end-to-end processing, the orchestration element that we talked about earlier. You know, so if a job on a system starts and finishes successfully, it kicks off another downstream suite of jobs. You know, and like we said, there is no typical engagement as such, but good scheduling software should offer customers a wide range of flexibility that kind of allows you to integrate across your entire IT landscape. You use things like APIs or command line. So it doesn't really matter how old your systems are, how disparate your IT environment is. A good scheduler should be able to sit over the top of everything that you have and give you control over all of your processes and visibility into what's going on.
Okay, we're going to get back into what defines a good scheduler a little bit later on, but first I'm going to go to some audience questions, because we've had a couple come through. Okay. I'm also going to be taking down our first poll in just a few minutes, so if you haven't taken part in the poll yet, please do so. So here we are, we've got some audience questions here. One from Rob. If an IT department doesn't currently have any automation, what would you say would be a great starting point?
Wow. I would be asking why your IT department doesn't have any automation in the first place. So, I mean, to purchase an enterprise scheduler, you're going to have a reasonable business case. And the first step should be looking at your environment and understanding what could be better. Now, if they're not automating anything, then it sounds like there's probably quite a lot to look at, you know. Now, I would need to understand more about the specifics of their environment, but a typical company would be looking at time wasted, for example. So if somebody's sitting waiting for a file to arrive in a folder before manually triggering a process, that's a problem, you know. You shouldn't be doing that. A good scheduler should allow you to set up a process that watches that folder, and when the file comes in, a process is triggered. It eliminates all of that white noise. So documenting your processes and understanding your processes as they exist currently is where you need to start. And then you can start looking at the market and start evaluating solutions and find a solution that kind of meets your core requirements, you know. But if a company's not automating at this point, then yeah, we could definitely help them improve their situation.
What would some possible reasons be for a company not automate? Like, could that actually be the case, that a company is not automating anything, or could it be that perhaps they don't have full visibility of what they're automating?
Yeah, it's possibly a common. I would be surprised if a company is operating, unless it's a small company, that doesn't have any kind of automation, you know. So most applications and programs and systems that companies are using have some degree of internal automation capabilities. The problem is that most of these things have a primary use that's not automation. So the automation capabilities are limited typically to internal use, you know. So if you've got an ERP, for instance, there'll be some scheduling functionality within that. But once you start trying to do something that involves taking that scheduling functionality outside of that system and into different systems, you start to encounter problems, you know. So I'd be surprised if the company was doing no automation, but understanding what they're doing currently is the starting point, really, the getting an improved automation capability into that organization.
Okay, so understanding, again, getting visibility
Yeah.
of all your processes. Okay, great. Good answer. Thank you. Another question here from Penny. To what extent can automation mitigate against cybersecurity staff shortages, something on a lot of people's minds at the moment? How much human interpretation is needed?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So the company I work for, HelpSystems, we specialize in security and automation, okay? Now, we have a wide range of security solutions, everything from data loss prevention, data classification, email phishing, reactive and proactive penetration testing, and a whole array of security solutions, okay? Part of that is automation as well. So we have a separate section of the business that just focuses on back-end automation, so high volume back-end automation that doesn't require a huge amount of human interaction. And we also have robotic process automation, which is more, think of it as front-end, anything to do with a mouse or any interaction with a keyboard or scraping data, okay? Now, both security and automation are, well, and will be ever increasingly more involved with each other. It's a very interesting space to be operating in, and HelpSystems is one of the kind of the groundbreaking companies in this. But the idea behind automation is to eliminate human interaction as much as possible. You know, there comes a point where you'll need someone involved even for troubleshooting or things like that. But the theory behind automation is that you eliminate the need for someone to be involved in it, so as they can spend their time doing more business critical activities, you know. So there is a sweet spot where a person doesn't need to be involved that much, but security and automation are very deeply entwined. And the more automation in your security, the better its efficiency. You know?
Okay. Let's have a look at the results of our first poll here.
Okay.
So I'm going to display those to our audience now. And here we go. So we're very high tech here. We just share a single laptop. So we asked, what challenges do you currently experience in running your IT tasks and processes? So it looks like job status visibility is number one, with about 28% of you saying that was a challenge. Equal numbers said centralized management and enforcing cross-platform and cross-application dependencies, about 21%. Again, equal numbers, around 11.5%, said triggering tasks dynamically in response to specific conditions. So that's orchestration right there. And other. So we'd love to hear from you what other means for you. And then only a small number of you, 7%, had a problem with repeatability. Is that roughly what you'd expect to see here, Greg?
Interesting results. I mean, repeatability is typically something that IT professionals love, you know, because it limits work. But just to go through those, like, I mean, centralized control and visibility of your jobs is huge, you know. What the software I sell, Jams, does is it actually gives you that central hub to manage everything. So you've got like a monitor view. You can drill into your jobs, your complex workflows, and see all of the upstream and all of the downstream dependencies. It's all about visibility. You can interact with these visual displays as well, you know, so you can see what's currently going on, you can see what's went on in the past, and you can see what's going to be going on in the future as well. So you have complete insight into your processing, okay? Now, what was the other one? Encircling, enforcing. Okay. So, what Jams does is it provides a single source of truth for all of the logic involved in your process and all of the schedules and all of the dependencies. Okay, so it allows you to build in really interesting stuff like, triggers, so if a file lands in a system, triggers a job. If there's an update on a database table, triggers a process. But then it also allows you to make decisions based on the outcomes of those jobs, So yeah, it's a really attractive feature for a lot of our customers because it reduces the need for people to be involved and makes your processing much more efficient. Now, we've got companies that they're kind of sort of linear processes, they're straightforward, but we also have customers that use huge workflows with hundreds or thousands of steps that just do some of the most complex spaghetti junction type things possible. Our engineers love looking at companies because it's constantly surprising how creative a company gets when they've actually got really good software at their disposal, So, but yeah, I appreciate the dependencies thing, but the reusability thing, it's like build once and then use everywhere, okay? And it's a really interesting space because it's one of those compelling business cases. I've got a customer, as an example, I talked to recently. They've got 50 SQL servers, and up until the point they started talking to us, if they wanted to make a change on those servers, that have to go into each one of them individually and do it. Whereas using software like Jams, you build one job and then you start leveraging things like parameters and variables, and it allows you then to use that one job to manage all of those servers. And when you think about the potential benefit of that to an organization, it can be quite significant,
Yeah.
So, yeah, interesting answers.
Interesting results, yeah, absolutely. Right, we're going to publish our second poll now, where we are asking what security or auditing challenges do you have at your organization in relation to job scheduling? Internal security audits, external security audits, ensuring least privilege access controls, security credential storage for automated processes, or again, other. And please do let us know what other means to you. So I'm publishing that now. Please do take part, and we're going to go through our next lot of questions. We have talked a lot about job scheduling now. Multiple platforms, different applications. How can job scheduling software like Jams help companies manage jobs like running across such a disparate environment?
Okay, so in many ways, really. So you have a disparate IT landscape, so you'll have lots of different ways of doing things across lots of different systems. Okay, typically that requires a vast array of knowledge from a lot of different people. And the thing about sort of IT departments, there's a lot of churn in IT departments. So someone can come in, they'll know one system, they'll set up loads of jobs or loads of processes or loads of scripts on that system, but then they'll move on to another company. And it's amazing how many organizations we talk to that have scenarios created like this, where they've got a high degree of knowledge on a specific system, but it moves on. And the processes are still running on that system, but nobody really knows what they're doing, And it's kind of that, if it's not broke, don't fix it approach, which everybody in IT is familiar with. But then it does break, yeah. And there's a potential huge impact down the line because when it breaks, they don't have the resource there to troubleshoot it. Okay, so what having a single pane of glass and a single source of truth like Jams does, it eliminates the need for everybody to learn all of the different systems and ways of doing things, and it gives you that one pane of glass to operate everything from. So whenever somebody new starts the company, they don't need to learn all these systems, they just need to learn how to set up a job in Jams. And the really cool thing about Jams is that it doesn't matter who accesses it, really. You've got enterprise security features which will limit the ability a person has to do anything that they're not meant to do in Jams. So companies can benefit obviously from an operational perspective, but they can also benefit then from a security perspective as well.
Okay, great. To the person who asked, is this being recorded? Yes, it is. This will be available as a pre-record later on. Just thought I'd clear that up for the person who asked. So job scheduling, we've talked about it a lot. It's also known in the industry as like workload automation or enterprise scheduling. And I want to focus in on that last one, enterprise. What sort of, because we've talked about small and medium businesses a bit now, what sort of enterprise functionality can these tools bring to the table?
Okay. So obviously centralization, which we'll talk about forever, you know, because centralization, that single pane of glass, it's extremely important, and the single source of truth as well. Any enterprise operating multiple systems needs to have visibility and control into those systems, irrespective of the person that they have looking at it. Yeah. Now, obviously, the benefit that brings is insight, and insight is what allows companies to operate, because if you can do something, you can do it better, and how do we improve that process is understanding it. Yeah. So monitoring and reporting is another massive element of what we do. So knowing what's going on, knowing what has went on and what's potentially going to go on, or the impact on what's going to go on from what is happening currently, is extremely important. What we were talking about earlier, reusability, building something once, having the ability to use it everywhere, and then the governance and compliance thing. We work with a vast amount of industries. It truly is non-specific in terms of the company types who approach us for help. We help companies across most industries, but about 40% of our business comes from banking and finance, you know, and it's a very heavily regulated industry, regulatory compliance and auditing and all of these lovely things that, you know, financial professionals in IT love, and they have to produce documentation all of the time on the processes that they've been running. So, and that's one of the biggest sort of benefits of having an enterprise scheduler, is because everything is documented. You've got awesome stuff like version control as well, you know. So, but when an auditor comes into one of our companies, our customers, they'll just need to produce the data that's stored in jams, the log files that's stored in jams, and yeah, just sort of life cycle management of your software development life cycle, you know, is what a lot of companies tell us that, you know, we wish we had done this years ago, because it sometimes takes companies a while to buy an enterprise scheduler. You know, I've had companies that I've been talking to for 3 or 4 years, and there's a high priority around solving their automation requirements, but something else comes in that's, you know, because the status quo has been the way it is for so long, it goes, we'll stay like that for another while. But we give companies the ability to have and separate all of their environments, you know. So your test, so you can let your testers test the jobs in an environment that's not going to have any impact on production. Your developers, the people that are being creative with these jobs, you can let them access on a development server as well. And then as each of these jobs hits the stage where it can be promoted to the next, then Jams gives you one single client to do that through, you know. And so that would be one of the biggest enterprise benefits, is the enterprise, the ability to promote those jobs through the software development lifecycle in a way that doesn't impact your production environment.
Great. So you've talked about customers a lot there. Let's zero in on that. Let's talk about one of your customers who sort of moved to your tool from something competing. Have you got an example?
I do. And the company, it was interesting that you talked about COVID, because this is a company that have been using our software for a good few years, but the benefits really came to the fore during COVID. The company's Bon Secours. They're an Irish health hospital organisation. Okay. Now, before they started looking at Jams, they operated their entire hospital on SQL Server Agent, Windows Task Scheduler, which are sort of native solutions. Now, when they came to us, they had established a number of issues with operational efficiencies, whether it's the processing of appointments or whether it's people coming in to, you know, for an appointment, and doctors not having visibility into their profiles, various other things, yeah. But and just sort of standard things, like things were scheduled on a time, but they were building in assumptions that something was going to take 15 minutes, you know. So I'll put a little bit of fat on this job and allow 20 minutes, but then sometimes that job took 25 minutes. So, you know, it just, everything was not as efficient as what it could be. So we started off looking at just their SQL jobs, and now we have a conversion utility in our software which allows it to just look at a server, a SQL server, and then effectively bring those jobs over into JAMS, which then allows you to implement enterprise control over those jobs. And so the benefit was immediate, you know. So they started just building in dependencies for that first range of jobs. But the interesting thing about that organization was during COVID, they were, obviously the demand was vast for testing, and they had a whole list of criteria that someone had to meet in order for them to come in for a test, and there was a manual element in processing that criteria. So the patient received an email, they ticked off a load of boxes, that email was returned to someone, an admin person who looked at the email, said okay, they can come in, and but they were able to automate the entirety of that process in the JAMS and saved like literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of administration time, you know. But these guys are still learning the software, you know. That's the good thing about enterprise scheduling software and about JAMS, is that there's you can get automation running very quickly in it, but the more you get into the software, the more capabilities you uncover, you know. So it's a constantly evolving learning curve. And the companies that I work with sort of love that learning curve, you know?
Yeah, sure. We have had a couple of questions come in regarding automation and DevOps, so I'll just sort of sum them up as how can JAMS fit into a DevOps pipeline?
Okay. So interestingly, this is a very hot space for a lot of the companies that use our software at the minute, you know? So it's because this is where people want to go with their IT departments, sort of that intersection between development and operations, you know, infrastructure as code and various other things. So what JAMS can do effectively is it can invoke any command line or API interface. So there's two ways to interact with the software. You can go in through the GUI, which is obviously the way a lot of most IT professionals go and click a button, drag and drop, build a process, you know. But then you've got the kind of the next level of technicality, and this is where JAMS comes into its own, really, because it was built in the .NET framework. It becomes very accessible for a lot of IT professionals, you know. So at a low level, you can interact on a code level with the software. So you can effectively export your entire schedule, make edits to it, and import it, re-import it as part of your Devops pipeline, and you don't have to open the software. Everything can be done on a code level, which a lot of the more advanced IT professionals that use our software love, you know. So job creation's possible through the API, and some of the more sort of super users of JAMS are doing really awesome things with their job creation and the software at a very low level.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for that, Greg. That's a great answer. I'm going to ask you a couple of other questions that have come in before we discuss the results of our second poll. So I'm going to leave that up for a couple more minutes just while we talk about this. So if you haven't taken part, please do so now. Here we are. Here's a question for you. What's the difference between what you're describing, Greg, and an observability platform, of which there are many on the market, as well as open source projects, this person says? The difference between a scheduling tool and an observability platform.
Okay, so a scheduling tool, we could probably take that really in in two parts. So an observability platform or a monitoring platform is a monitoring platform. Yeah, monitoring is an element of what Jams does, and we get asked questions like this a lot of the time. So a lot of companies, and this will always be the case, a lot of companies try to repurpose existing solutions to function for another critical purpose. So monitoring platforms are for looking at jobs, not necessarily interacting or creating jobs and building complex processes. So it may have some scheduling capabilities, but it's like I said, the scheduling capabilities on platforms that do a different function, that are developed to do a different function, tend not to be as good as something that's been developed as a scheduler. So it's we have a lot of customers that come to us and say, we're using this for running our jobs, and you're going, yeah, okay. That you're going to see a vast amount of benefit from Jams, because it has so much more capabilities. And customers don't know the limits of what they use. They think, yeah, this is what everybody has used for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in some cases, and it's just a question of understanding the benefits of enterprise scheduling software. Now, the open source question, there are a few open source schedulers out there, but is open source you're effectively relying on Google for your support, and things like security are typically an issue. I have talked to many customers that had used open source solutions to manage their scheduling, but then they've encountered reliability issues, they've encountered scalability issues, security issues as well in some circumstances, but we have been developing Jams since 1985. It's a very mature solution. We're constantly evolving. The dialogue between our customers, and we're constantly looking at market trends and new technologies, and we invest a lot of money in making sure that our software is on point, okay? Which is effectively why you'd go for a proprietary solution over an open source solution, because it's going to be better, better software, but then better service, So there's much more than just the software, really, because we sell awesome software. Jams is a really awesome piece of software, but it's not just the software that we sell. We sell the service as well. So we've got like a professional services team who help design, implement, and train everything to do with Jams. They've completed hundreds of successful implementations all over the world, and we've got a very, very happy customer base. And then we've got the support, so if you're a company and you're running mission critical jobs and a job breaks for whatever reason, you need to know why it's broke, and you need to have a strategy to try and fix it. Open source, a lot of the companies that come to me with open source have used it for a long time, but then something happened and they've tried to Google the answer. Nobody knows what it is, So with open source, you're dependent on like Google and Goodwill for your support, effectively. Whereas with a software like Jams, you've got a team of really experienced engineers that have been delivering support for that software. The average tenure, by the way, of our support staff is 5 years, So these guys know what they're doing, and you don't get that with open source software. You also don't get it with a monitoring platform either,
Fair enough. Very comprehensive answer. Thanks for that. Yeah. We've got one other question here that's come through, bit open-ended, so do what you can with it. What recommendations do you have for organizations struggling to manage their security stack?
Okay. It depends on their definition of security stack, and their definition really of struggling. What I would say is that we have a whole raft of security solutions available, and we also have the ability to get you in contact with someone that can talk to you about your security stack in its entirety, and also potentially to look at possibilities of automating more, in your environment. So we have a team of professionals that can help in many different areas. So my recommendation would be to head over to the HelpSystems website and put your details in. Tell them that you've seen us on Incisive Media, and someone will reach out to have a conversation about your current challenges.
Okay, fair enough. Brilliant, thanks. Let's have a look at the results of our last poll before we close for the day, because we're nearly out of time here. I will display the results to our audience, and here we go. Whoa. What security or auditing challenges do you have a organization in relation to job scheduling? So, many of you, 47.6%, ensuring least privilege access controls. So that's zero trust, effectively, that we're getting into. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a growing part of it. 21% of you have challenges with internal audits. 12% have problems with external audits. 14% have challenges with secure credential storage for automated processes, and then 4.8%, 5% effectively, have problems with other. No one's actually got in touch to say what other means, so unfortunately we're just going to have to count those as something nebulous. But nearly half of people having problems with least privilege access controls.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, you know. So you have obviously various different positions in any IT organization, and each of those people will have different levels of access into the IT world, really, you know, and IT security. Now, what JAMS does, it integrates directly with the company's Active Directory system, and it allows you to put in really granular controls over how much access or even visibility a user has into the jobs that are running. Okay, so you can just let this person see this amount of jobs, and that's it, you know. So if your role only requires you to run 10 particular jobs, the best way for you to do that is just to have access to those jobs. A way a lot of companies operate is, you know, a particular job will need a password, for example, and where scripting is concerned, which a lot of companies do, these passwords may be visible, right? So you could be doing a job, you don't have the level of access required to run this process, so you're going to have to use the credentials belonging to someone else, but then this password is visible in the code, you know, whereas JAMS removes all of that and gives you a much more locked down and secure approach to managing your IT tasks and processes. So it truly is sort of least privileged, and it integrates with Active Directory. It actually has a pretty cool job that you just run whenever you start testing the software. It'll build like 4 different folders for you, which give developers sysadmin access and etc. But yeah, you can configure that whichever way suits your business requirement.
And the last one I want to ask you about is this internal security audits that's presenting a challenge. Why might that be?
It could be a huge amount of reasons. There's lots of various different auditing pressures on IT environments, especially in the more, as we mentioned earlier, the financial side of things, you know. So internal audits can sometimes be more painful than, you know, external audits, because we need to know who pressed the button on this. You know, if something goes wrong, for instance, then there needs to be a traceable lineage back to the reason why that went wrong, whether that's someone pressed the wrong button, or somebody dropped the wrong file into somewhere, or made the wrong update on a database, whatever that happens to be. We need to have visibility of it. But internal audits, a lot of the time, are triggered by that type of thing, you know? Okay, so why did this happen? And that's why it can be a problem.
So it all comes back down to visibility.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Who did what, when, and why, you know?
Yeah. So we're all out of time now. I'm going to ask you for just your closing thoughts on the topic. Just to sort of sum up what we've talked about for people before we sign off.
Okay, I did write a little thing for why JAMS. Now I've lost my page, but here we go. So yeah, so what we do is we help people effectively improve their operation. Okay, we help lots of different companies across lots of different verticals, and the software that we sell, Jams, is enterprise-grade software that allows companies to improve efficiencies across their entire operation. It makes it easy to bring your jobs in, to build new jobs, and it gives the control over your IT environment that enterprises require, you know? So not only do we sell the software, but we also have a really awesome team of professionals backing that software up, because you don't just buy software, you also buy the service, okay? Now, and it's a really experienced team as well. We've got loads of successful implementations under our belt. Right now, at this minute, Jams is running like tens of millions of jobs, if not billions of jobs, every day. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You know, scheduling software, it doesn't go on holiday, it doesn't phone in sick, it doesn't go home or go to the pub early on a Friday. It does what it says on the tin. It schedules your enterprise. But we have the resources and the knowledge available to make that happen, because it's not just about buying the software, it's about making it happen as well. And what's kind of unique about what we offer is every customer that buys Jams keeps it. Like, we have a plus 98% satisfaction rating with the software across our whole customer base, but we also have a 99% plus renewal rate. Okay, so companies, when they implement the software, they're happy with the software, they're happy with the service, they're happy to renew. You know, it forms an integral part of their operation. And without enterprise scheduling software, you know, lots of the companies that are our customers now would be operating a less efficient business. So honestly, if you're out there, you're looking at your environment and things are going wrong, you're not sure what went wrong, or you're having to go into a server to start troubleshooting, or, you know, whatever the pain point might be, we are experts in all types of automation. So come, talk to us. We'd be happy to have a discussion, and we can also talk to you about the security side of things as well, and deliver a sort of an automation and a security suite of solutions that, you know, not many other companies are in a position to deliver.
Sure. Thank you so much, Greg. Thanks for joining me today to talk about this important topic.
Awesome.
And
thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and with you. And thank you to you, our audience. Join us next time. We'll be doing many webinars in the future, possibly more with Greg. I would hope so, because that was an excellent session. And we will see you again very soon.